And it's really kind of almost like retraining yourself or relearning how to kind of be within your own self, your own
Mhm.
body, within these sort of different energetic levels.
Going Inside is a podcast on a mission to help people heal from trauma and reconnect with their authentic self. Join me, trauma therapist John Clark, for guest interviews, real life therapy sessions, and soothing guided meditations. Whether you're navigating your own trauma, helping others heal from trauma, or simply yearning for a deeper understanding of yourself, Going Inside is your companion on the path to healing and self discovery. Download free guided meditations and apply to work with me one on one at johnclarktherapy.com. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Boshko Boskovic is a Reiki master and certified sound healing practitioner by the Sound Healing Center in Sausalito, California. He's the founder of Let's Heal NYC, a private practice specializing in Reiki and sound healing treatments. As a certified dementia practitioner, Boshko regularly holds Reiki and sound healing sessions at memory care units. He also hosts group sound healing sessions at locations such as Grand Street Healing Project, 14th Street Y, and older adult centers in New York City. Boshko can be reached through his website, letshealnyc.com, or Instagram at letshealnyc. Boshko, thank you so much for doing this. What else should people know about who you are and how you got here?
Thank you, John, for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk about what I do, especially within the
Mhm.
context what you do. But yeah, maybe what people should know about me that I like to share is how I got where I am. I started actually both Reiki and sound healing for my own health. So I had a thyroid imbalance that, I was doing traditional medicine. And then I've heard that really working with your own voice, because the thyroid is in our throat, can be beneficial. So I actually started my certification for my own well-being. And Reiki too, I ran into a high school teacher that was doing Reiki. Level 1 Reiki is for self-care, actually. So it's
Mhm.
just for you and your family. And then as you go further into the practice, you can practice with clients. So when she explained the concepts of the Reiki system, I was like, oh, this is like a really kind of beneficial way to actually regulate yourself and your own health. So that was kind
Mhm.
of like my entry point into this world. And then one thing led to another, and 6 years later I have my own practice in both modalities. So yeah, that's kind of like
Mhm.
in a nutshell.
Yeah, great. What should people know about Reiki and what is it? How does it work? How can it help people, especially in our realm of healing from trauma?
Sure. So Reiki is actually like a system of healing touch. It's a touch therapy, although it's that originates from Japan. It is also a spiritual practice that's was rediscovered by Dr. Usui in Japan in the late 1800s. And then it was through one practitioner, Mrs. Takata, got it in the United States via
Mhm.
Hawaii. So that's just kind of like in a nutshell of, kind of like where it comes from, without going too much into detail because of time. But ostensibly, it is a touch therapy. It can be done directly on the body or above. Some practitioners work above the body. There are certain parts that you only work above the body. You do not, depending what it is. But the client is basically on a massage table, fully clothed, and the practitioner, usually the session is 60 minutes, and it's done from the top of the head to the end of the physical body, basically the
Mhm.
feet, and it follows the meridian chart of the body like acupuncture does, but not in a minute way as acupuncture does, more kind of like 12 to 15 body parts. And ostensibly it works with the energy centers of our body that can be kind of like divided, upper body, lower body. And the way that I like to explain it is that, as we all know, like our body has like trillions of cells and they all emanate a little bit of electricity. So altogether,
Mm.
there's this electromagnetic field around our body that we don't see through the eyes, but it really, like, the body vibrates. And when we are in stress situations, when there's trauma, when there's like difficult things, the body doesn't emanate, it vibrates in a much faster way, or things might be stuck as well, and then it vibrates in a much lower, or it's like things are really dense. So what Reiki does, and we'll get that to later in sound healing, in different ways, it basically kind of it can soothe the body, but it can also like open vibratory channels and things so that our being basically vibrates at an optimal level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, go ahead if there's more.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, like, the way we live contemporary life, everything is at a much higher pace. People are stressed out. They don't get enough sleep. They don't get enough regeneration. We are bombarded through social media, emails. People are like, rarely does somebody like start their job and finish and clock out and they're not like reachable anymore.
Yeah.
So all that kind of like magnifies how our bodies are basically suffering through all of that, and we don't almost like we get disoriented a little bit due to all of that. So I think that's also one of the reasons why particularly sound healing, I think, is getting more and more popular, that people are going, and we can talk about that a little bit later, like sound baths and things that you kind of like find this container of peace and calm for, like, whether it's 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or whatever it is, to just kind of like recalibrate. There are many alternative modalities that are out there, but I think that's why a lot of these things are getting more traction for people in general.
Let's go further with that. I mean, this is super relevant in terms of just what it's like to be a person living in these times. I've been thinking about this lately and actually having a lot of ambivalence about my phone and just how reachable I am to everyone and everything at all times, right? And what a burden that can be and how that feels. I'm also someone, like many therapists, who is quite sensitive to energy. I'll give you another example. It's
And yeah,
like,
and I want to touch upon that as well,
yeah.
because I think that there's something, and there's actually a program that I started a little bit that I'd be really curious to talk about that with you.
I'd love to hear about that, because just to fill you in a little bit on my story and for
Oh,
the
yes,
listeners
please.
is, I've been a therapist my whole career, doing this 15 some years, but only a few years ago, when I kind of hit a wall with my clinical work and had burnout and was just taking on too much, and every client session felt like it cost me a lot. I turned to Reiki as one of the many things I did to try to help
Amazing.
myself. Reiki, Qi Gong, I started a Qi Gong practice. Even like a 10-minute daily practice started to really change things for me. Reiki started to help a lot, so I am now level 2 Reiki trained, and kind of loosely integrated into my work with clients, but more so do it for my own system and my own energy, kind of energy hygiene,
That's what I
I,
say. That's what I tell
yeah,
clients, that Reiki is actually energy hygiene, the same way that we're
yeah.
accustomed to do massage once
Mm-hmm.
a month, that it's in a different way. But we don't think, because back to what I was saying, we don't see the electromagnetic field. I call our electromagnetic field actually our energy field, that some people are a little more skeptical about, like, wait, what is this? But you
Yeah,
carry your energy everywhere with you.
yeah,
It's kind of like it's the energetic body around us.
exactly. Which, and they've also done scans. I remember when I first was learning about our electromagnetic field, it makes sense. Our bodies are full of electricity, and you have a field that can actually be seen on a scan, and is, yeah, the energy around you. And of course, that energy bumps into and interacts with the energy of other people's magnetic fields. Not to mention, if you live in a city like you do, and
Absolutely.
like
Like
I
New
do,
York. Yes.
it's just
Yes.
like, I was actually just in New York, and it's way more uh, urban than San Francisco, in my case, where I can get out, quickly, and it's a smaller city, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm,
Mm-hmm.
I can dip my toes in the ocean whenever
Mm-hmm.
I need to.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you even think about that? Yeah, just being in a city and being around people all the time.
Well, yeah, that's something that actually, like, I think a lot about, and especially for people that are more sensitive to energy. And I didn't learn about this until I started doing Reiki and sound healing and energy work. That nobody, I think this should be taught in grade schools, is that we have an energy field, and it's through the power of the mind that we can actually create these, whether you want to call it boundaries or bubbles or
Mm-hmm.
things that you kind of actually like protect yourself, not in a sense that somebody's going to do something like evil to you, but you need to kind of, back to the hygiene thing, to kind of have this thing. It's a mental thing that you protect yourself so you don't merge with other energies, because that will drain your energy, or it will impact, I mean, it will impact anyone. Back to like New York City, the subway system since the pandemic, because of certain budget cuts and things to the city, a lot of people with mental health problems don't have shelters that they
Mm-hmm.
had before. And the one place where they gather because of warmth or a place to stay is the
Mm-hmm.
subway system. And a lot of us, a lot of us in New York, including myself, take the subway system. So when
Mm-hmm.
somebody enters a subway car that has a mental health problem and they're narrating whatever they are in a
Mm-hmm.
disruptive way, it will really impact you.
Mm-hmm.
And you either go to another car, or you just kind of like have a mental way to kind of protect yourself from it.
Mm-hmm.
Although when it's very intrusive, it's even hard to do that, even with, the mental bubbles, boundaries, eggs, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This I think the more you start to tune into this stuff and tune into your own energy, the more you can notice how uh, easily and quickly and chronically it is affected, by those around you. In the same way that being around someone with very wonderful energy can be uplifting,
Mm-hmm.
and you're
And
affirming,
you're drawn to that.
you're drawn to that, right?
But you said a key thing that was repeated in a lot of my trainings that I did, and it's
Mm.
probably because you've done them too, which is tuning into your own energy.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
order to kind of like know what's going with other people, you have to kind of like really start with yourself.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of almost like retraining yourself or relearning how to kind of be within your own self, your own
Mm-hmm.
body, within these sort of different energetic levels. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes fascinating the more you dive into it, to see how many levels, layers, and they're called for a reason in energy work, subtle bodies.
Mm.
And there are, Barbara Brennan, who is like a big name in this field, has a
Mm.
book, and it's called like the seven energetic bodies, and there are like
Mm-hmm.
beautiful drawings in that book, that there are seven bodies that go beyond the physical body, that correspond to the seven sort of like seven chakras, which is like the system from the Hindu system. So all of these things, and a lot of philosophies or even religions, when you dive deeper
Mm-hmm.
into that and read, there's like so much crossover of all of these things. In the essence,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. And then if you
Yeah.
really look at it at the super macro level, it's like the universe and how we're all connected. And there's like, modern physics basically is, and this can be like maybe a segue into
Mm-hmm.
sound healing, or if you want to talk about other things, is that we're everything, that we're all connected and everything vibrates in this world. But that basically comes from the premise of modern physics, that on a subatomic level, everything vibrates, including neurons and electrons and string theory and quantum mechanics. It
Mm-hmm.
all basically is talking about that there's a connection of everything and how it
Mm-hmm.
vibrates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When people say like the vibe is off, um, It's like they're literally talking about someone's vibration.
Yes. Or like I'm vibing with that person. Like,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's, that's the,
Vibrating with them. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah, I mean, I would love for you to keep going and weave in the sound healing piece. I'll say it's not something that we've talked about on the show. It's something I have experienced, a few times in different workshops, healing workshops and yoga workshops and stuff like that. But I'm very curious to hear you talk more about it.
Sure. So I'll just like maybe start with basically what we just talked about, like kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the vibrating concept in physics, but
Mm-hmm.
this really belongs to an ancient practice of sound healing. It's not something that's really new. We're rediscovering it. So, for instance, in the United States, we know about yoga from the 70s, let's say, when it has been more popularized. So it's been, let's say, around like 50 something years here. But Nada yoga, which is just one vein or one path, let's say, of yoga, is the yoga of sound that has been around for a very long time and has been used for therapeutic purposes. And it doesn't only use the sounds as we know it through instruments. It's also the human voice is a very that's like the first really like instrument, but also through different like mantras that you have. When I was studying them a little bit through my certification, I'd like to go deeper, but when you go really deep, they're talking about like it's really important how you pronounce the mantra. If your tongue is on your upper root, because your upper root is connected to your brain cell. So there's this whole like cosmology of sound that I'm not going to go into. But the one reason why I feel that it's becoming sound baths are becoming more popular, because if done correctly, they are a very easy way to go directly to the brain waves and to actually like slow them down. And once the brain waves are slowed down, the body actually is able to relax more and to receive more. But what I found interesting through some of the readings that I've done is that the ear is much more accurate than the sight, actually 10 times more accurate than the sight. And when the embryo is forming, the ear is the first thing to form. And when we die, the hearing is the last thing to kind of shut off. So it's just sort of like tells you how hearing is really like a powerful tool, and how sound healing can really work. But I can go in different like directions here with sound healing to talk a little bit more, because you mentioned that you haven't talked about it
Yeah.
much. Depends, like I can talk a little bit about the voice as well, how it can be included in the sound healing. I work with Alzheimer and dementia patients. I can talk about that experience, which is really super interesting for me, and how like sound and touch also through Reiki. But I just wanted to see like where you would like to kind of go from here.
Well, my inclination is to hear more about the voice. I'm very curious
Sure.
about how
Yeah.
that's integrated. Hey, if you're a therapist, I want to help you deepen your client work, help them get better results without burning yourself out. You can do all this by learning to harness the power of IFS. So I want to tell you, we've got a free IFS resource library that you can download now. This is full of resources like my quick start guide to IFS, the full IFS protocol, a bunch of demos of me doing IFS with real people, and extra self-care practices for therapists. You can get all this for free in the link in the description, and I hope you enjoy. Also, one of the handful of models I use is somatic experiencing, Peter Levine, and
Yep.
we do some different techniques there with the voice and with humming and things like that.
I do.
Good for the
Yes,
nervous
I do
system.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's not like the whole program isn't about the voice and humming, but it's just one of many ways to work with the nervous system directly,
Yeah.
and really to work with energy directly. Although we're using the language of the nervous system, in a training like therapy, but to me it's all kind of the same, like it's all energy, you know. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about the voice.
Yeah, so I basically I was introduced to the concept of sounding, which basically is making sounds through your voice for sound healing purposes through my training at the Sound Institute in Sausalito, California, through these two amazing teachers, Lisa Raffel and Vicky Dodd, that have been doing this for, I think, close to 40 years. What I thought was really interesting, and actually, Vicky Dodd has an amazing book. I'm going to give a shout out to her, Healing Through Sound, Awakening Your Audible Body. And she's been doing this for so long that she said that when she started doing it, I think in the late 60s, that it had to be kind of like on the DL, that it was so out there that, she was like also a body worker, and she would do that. And then on top of it, she would be doing these like subtle things with the, okay of the clients. But basically they opened my mind to the concept of sounding, which is actually using your voice on a very intuitive kind of primal way, first for yourself, to kind of like Vicky talks about this concept of emptying the body through sound. So we are all like 60% water, and we're liquid beings. And through actually sounding through your own voice, and a lot of times that can be stored trauma, stored pain, stored grief, that you actually, on a very subtle level, through the power of your voice, can really kind of open up things that are stagnant, that are crystallized. And I forget, this wasn't, I'm going to tell a personal story how it happened for me. I forget, I know that it was the pandemic 2020. I forget if I already started it doesn't really matter if I started the certification or not. But one night I woke myself up because I was screaming in my dreams. And I woke up my partner, and I was like, "Oh my God, did I wake up my, my neighbors and whatnot?" And I've been in different kind of therapies for years, and just it was kind of like a bell that something's like really off. That I have to do something with this. And I live close to Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and it was the pandemic, and I knew that it was like, it wasn't that people weren't going as frequently, but I went really late at night because I know the park very well, and I went on the highest point, and I just sort of like started screaming and doing things, trying to kind of like unearth, or it wasn't screaming first, but just kind of like getting things like out of my body. And I really saw, the more I was doing it, I was doing it pretty regularly, there was more kind of like anger, rage, whatever that was like really pent up from like years back. And then I started like really, I'm originally from Belgrade, Serbia. So Serbian is my first language. And most of my nuclear family is deceased. I then, after all of that, like started imagining talking to my parents, my grandmother that I lived with, like telling them all these things that I never told them, that I needed to tell them, that, from childhood and all these things. So just back to kind of like the voice, how I like very intuitively started like working on myself to kind of like unearth all of these things that were like lying down like deep somewhere through these channels. And then through this program, really like, and these teachers kind of learning myself, to teaching myself, or opening these channels where I saw that these intuitive things that through sound can be done. So I actually like use them now in my sound baths that I do with instruments. I use my own voice to enhance the sound healing. And a lot of times it's reminiscent of nature or chirping of birds or whistling. Or sometimes when I do the really low tones with the Shruti box, a lot of people ask me like, oh, it sounds like, Tibetan Buddhist monks or things like that. Have you like trained with that? I was like, no, I didn't. It's through like Vicky and Lisa that like they opened this portal and a lot of times people say like, oh, this sounds like really ancient, old, whatever. And I was like, well, I don't really know. I just kind of tap into it. And I think we all have that capacity. It's just kind of like repetition and practice and tuning into all of things. And that takes time and practice. It doesn't, and dedication. It doesn't just come like overnight.
Well, the practice of using sound is just found in everything in history, including religion, and singing collectively, chanting collectively, like chanting Hare Krishna. It's like it's built in. And also for people who don't even know what the words mean, there's something profound about that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's something that people just connect with, right? It just resonates literally in your body and figuratively, and emotionally. And so, well, the story about that night and that practice of kind of using your body, of screaming, of releasing some of this rage, of saying things that were yet to be said is really apropos for our show and what we talk about here, because so much of like what gets stuck in us and in trauma, of all types, is something is happening to me or around me and I can't do anything or say anything about it, right? And there's a momentary or chronic loss of agency or loss of one's voice, literally and figuratively, that is a big part of trauma, right? And especially when we're young, when the safest thing to do is to say nothing or shut up or smile or say, yes, daddy, yes, mommy, or whatever, right? Or to not tell mommy and daddy about getting bullied at school because that would upset them.
That's exactly what happened. That's what it actually was. I mean, I didn't want to go into details, but I was actually like being bullied at school for being different than other boys, actually, being a gay little boy. But I knew that I wasn't able to share that with my family because they would, that wasn't acceptable.
Totally. Well, it's fine. I was just mentioning that example, but it's funny. It's
Things
dead
happen
on.
for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know where that came from, but there you go. And again, it was safer then, to not say anything. But then the question is like, where does that go? Right? Where does that energy inside that little boy go? And does it need to be expelled or expressed or breathed through or whatever, sung, at some point? And I think the more I do this work and as a psychotherapist who thinks of clients holistically, what needs to happen for them to heal, right? And also, I think all healing arts are really just tapping into the body and the psyche's natural propensity toward healing and the mechanisms, the self-healing that is built into all of us, the way that when you get a cut in your arm, your body instantly knows what to do to start healing it, if we create the right conditions for it to heal and keep it clean and covered and rest and all these things, right? It's like, oh yeah, that cut healed, or that cold that I had healed, or whatever. And so much of what I think about in therapy and the healing arts is that, right? Even going back to Reiki, seeing it as really, it's not something that the Reiki master is giving the recipient, like something that's coming out of you and into them. It's really helping to channel this source energy, this energy that's available to all of us and already inside of all of us, and helping people access that. So that really shifts the definition of therapy, right? Because the classic definition and like understanding of therapy is like, I'm going to come to someone like John for some wisdom that he might impart on me, right? Some guidance, right? He knows something I don't, or is more sage than me, right? And it's like, that's what a guru is. Maybe if you go to someone and they're like, I'm your guru and I'm going to blow your mind, and here's what you're doing wrong, and you should break up with him or not break up with him, or whatever, you have a drinking problem or you don't have a drinking problem. But people largely think that's what therapy is and that's what therapy is about, and it's not. But we have to work day in and day out as therapists to not be put in that position and put in that seat, because clients are desperate for a guru. They're desperate for someone to save them or to know all the answers, right? Just tell me it's all going to be okay. And I'm going, it's terrifying to not know if it's going to be okay or not. It's terrifying to be a human, facing your humanity and feeling out of control, right? Or wondering, is there another pandemic going to happen again? It's hard to not know, right? Who's going to get elected? It's hard to not know. But again, therapists we're like, fellow travelers in this.
Absolutely.
But as
Absolutely.
therapists, we let ourselves get put in this position of like knowing a lot and having some wisdom, or just telling a client what we think they should do. And then all of a sudden we are undermining their agency, right? Because what
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
communicates is you're not capable on your own. You need someone like me to come in and be more wise or
Tell
whatever,
you what to do,
tell you what
or,
to do.
yeah. And I think those are like sometimes there are no shortcuts in life. And I think for a lot of people, it's an easier way to maybe cope with
Yeah.
what's going on. But at the end of the day, we all have to do the work.
Yeah.
I think that's what people don't realize, like that it's work. But it took me a long time. Like now, when I do my own therapies with other people, I actually like don't look at it as work. I look at it as exploration. and
I
and
don't know
and
what's
it's
about to happen
just,
here in this
yeah.
session.
And sometimes I go and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, and
Yeah.
and then there's like the most wonderful things. And before, I used to be like really like, I'm going on the subway to my session, it was like, we're going to talk about this is the
Yeah.
agenda. And that's
Exactly.
where I was at that point. But
Yeah.
now and sometimes I have specific things if something happened, but other
Sure.
times like I have no idea. And it's
Yeah.
actually like a wonderful place to be, and to be okay with it.
Well, that's beautiful. Yeah. And that, I train and supervise a handful of clinicians for the board, so they're in residency with me for a few years. And that's something we were just talking about yesterday, is the practitioner letting go of our need to know, and parts of us that want to know how the session's going to go, or is my client going to come in and say, I've gotten so much better this week, or I've gotten way worse. And parts of us are going, oh no, I must not be doing my job right if they've
Yeah.
gotten worse, or if
Yeah.
they've
Yeah. Yeah.
relapsed,
Yeah.
or if they got back together with that abusive partner, or whatever it might be. But the paradox is like when I come into a session, whatever modality I'm using, and the paradox is like, if I can release my attachment to like something needs to happen here, or something epic needs to happen here, or I need to give my client something, then if I can, the more I let go of that, paradoxically, the more happens, right? And the
Yeah.
more those magical and mystical things just naturally happen. And again, it puts client in the driver's seat to be part of what is making that happen. And their momentum and their propensity toward healing and change, right, is it's there, right? And it takes a lot of pressure off the practitioner, right? And I know
For
my
sure.
Reiki teacher talked a lot about this too when we were starting to learn how to, do Reiki with clients. So I think therapists can learn a lot from Reiki and from this definition of like, what is a healer, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, I started a program about 2 years ago where I go sometimes to different like offices, whether they're like with the city, with mental health, or certain. I had an idea, I never really developed it fully, with like therapist offices to have programs where therapists actually get Reiki, or we have these like sound sessions, because you're in the position, you care about other people. And I forgot, I came up with a catchy title or something like, for those who care for others, that, to do these like Reiki circles or things, because like, especially from the pandemic, like every therapist that I know, like, their businesses
Burnout.
like exploded and burnout and so
Yeah.
much. So, and
Yeah.
even like once I went into an office, even when it was like 15-minute sessions with like staff, I would go for a couple of hours in the morning and in the afternoon. Like it works.
I'm really curious, like, what type of things you did with therapists then. And even I mentioned some things that have worked for me is like a daily Qi Gong practice, just to work with my own energy a little bit in the morning, see where it's at. The thing that shifted everything for me with Qi Gong was realizing like not only do I have energy or this energetic body, as you said, but I can actually interact with it and work with it and like move it up and down, right? Or notice that it's more intense or hot here or here or here or whatever or here. And that's also very empowering to know you can kind of interact with and move your own energy.
Mhm.
Um, I'm also like, when I discovered it or started using it, I was living in the Sunset neighborhood in San Francisco, which is a predominantly Chinese neighborhood. So you have, 105-year-old Chinese people doing Qi Gong
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
in the park near my house. Like, and I'm always just like, oh yeah, they're doing that weird thing, like playing with imaginary balls, uh,
Mhm.
but then realizing like this stuff is real and it works and it's
Mhm.
powerful.
Mhm.
And therapists should probably have some sort of practice of their own, even in between clients, or in my case,
Mhm.
as a trauma
Mhm.
therapist, I deal with the darkest content imaginable and hear the most horrific details and stories and of abuse and neglect and assault and all these things, violence. So yeah, I'm curious what thoughts you have in that regard with helping practitioners.
Well, I mean, I have some thoughts on that. That could be like
Mm.
little exercises, but what I've done was to either go into a place of office where there are like therapists, and I would go
Mm-hmm.
like it would be like a, you know, wellness afternoon or something where I would just go and I would have a designated office and
Mm-hmm.
people would like sign up before I come for 15-minute
Mm.
slots, and I would have like little time in between, and I would actually like talk. I would talk to them like as I would for anyone who comes for an hour Reiki session. So they would just tell me within like two,
Mm.
3 minutes, like what's going on that day or what's chronic with them. And then I would do like a mini Reiki session.
Mm-hmm.
My idea, what I wanted to do that I said that I didn't like, I need to go back to that
Mm-hmm.
to actually, and I know one office where, it's like a big office primarily for run by the LGBT community for
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ clients. And there's like, I don't know, 10, 12 therapists. And my idea was that I need to follow up with and to have like maybe monthly sessions with them where it's kind of like a mix of sound healing and Reiki, where
Mm-hmm.
it's, kind of like a wellness monthly
Mm-hmm.
session, as you would go to like a yoga studio or somewhere, but I kind of like come to them and they're all, it's just for therapists, and it could be actually even maybe like targeted each month what we kind of like work on. So yeah, that's.
It's great.
But back to what you were saying, I think that there can be, that it would be helpful. I never thought about that, but it could be almost like a little, you design like a little mini curriculum for individual therapists where it's kind of like a mix of things that you don't have to go through the training, but almost like exercises. It could be like humming or vowels,
Mm-hmm.
that you do certain things with your voice, or movement, or things that
Mm-hmm.
you can maybe do within in between sessions to almost just kind of like get an energetic cleanse from one client to another. Or maybe you do it after 3, if you have like 6 clients a day, you do it in between the morning and afternoon, so you just kind of like dust off what you might have accumulated.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be something like almost like a little curriculum that you can do within like 20 minutes or something, that it could be like from different modalities that you pick and choose, but you don't have to go through the training. It's very like self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For most therapists, this goes back to an insurance thing, or why therapy is for many practitioners 50 minutes, just shy of an hour. That was an arbitrary insurance thing, but many therapists, even those who don't take insurance, they do 50-minute sessions, which you hit 50 minutes, the client stops talking at 10:52. You spend 3 minutes talking about the calendar, the schedule for next time, or that credit card that needs to be updated on file or whatever. And then you have 3 minutes until your next client arrives, or they're already
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
lobby.
yeah.
And I remember one time when I was talking to someone who does energy work, like she was astounded that I didn't have any sort of practice for like clearing, and even
Mm-hmm.
clearing the physical space in between clients, or if you're on
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, doing some sort of clearing,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I think that's something most therapists do not do and are just rushing in between
Mm-hmm.
people. But I also know when I go see my Reiki instructor for sessions, there's a whole lot of preparation she does,
Yeah.
but before the session and after and in between
Mm-hmm.
the sessions, and that's very intentional and methodical and
Mm-hmm.
slow. It takes time, like
Mm-hmm.
takes an extra half hour, 45
Mm-hmm.
minutes or whatever
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for her to be ready to do another session and to feel clear enough to do that. So again, I just think there's a lot of therapists that we can learn from practitioners like you. Yeah. Yeah. You got maybe, 5 minutes left or so. What do you think is missing from the conversation, and what do you want to make sure that people hear today?
Um, let's see. I think that we touched upon a lot of things. I think that maybe one thing for people to take away is to, and I think this is like, it sounds easy, but it's the most hardest thing, I think, is that if we could all just sit a little bit more with ourselves
Mm-hmm.
in silence and tune in to kind of be a little more curious, to kind of find out a little bit what's going on
Mm-hmm.
within us, and then start the exploration somehow, because I think especially nowadays with what's happening in our country, everything is so external, and
Mm-hmm.
we're bombarded with things that we almost sometimes don't know how to go a little bit inward. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, however that looks,
Yeah.
and that could be a walk in nature.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be a spiritual practice, it doesn't have to be an energy practice, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
meditation, although meditation is very helpful, but something that is back to what you're saying, maybe away from the phone
Mm-hmm.
and the devices, and
Mm-hmm.
just something that, walk by the ocean, or
Yeah.
be with your cat, or I don't know, something
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
For whatever reason, people feel like they need permission to do that. So you're giving that permission right now, which I really appreciate. I end up giving it to my clients, right? Because I can tell there are parts of them that feel like guilty for doing that, or that would be selfish, or that, like, quote, self-care is selfish or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of the opposite, which is that the more you take those moments, whatever that looks like for you, the more you have to offer the world, or whatever cause you are fighting for. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it, and everything that we do consume, and even just absorbing media at all hours of the day and from all angles, is like, again, where does all that energy go? And it is
Absolutely.
traumatizing to see some of the horrors playing out in the world and not being able to do anything about it, and feel like, well, and also, like, I can't look away. My client's like, I can't look away. I don't want to be uninformed. I don't want to be ignorant to what's happening. But it's also like, how is that helping?
Yeah,
Or
but
where does that energy go?
yeah,
If you, yeah.
I think at least I can just say what's helpful for me,
Mm-hmm.
what I've been implementing. I'll just share that in
Mm-hmm.
what you said last about consuming media, is I also don't want to be uninformed, but I kind of started scheduling how many times per week
Mm-hmm.
am I consuming the
Yeah.
news, to know what's happening, but not to be kind of pushed into the whirlwind of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And my tip would be mobilize that energy, right? So, for instance, I had a client who was very, very, very anxious about what would happen in the most recent election. And part of how he worked through that was he transformed some of that energy into action, into doing something about it, right? I think
Yeah,
that's a very good thing to do, even if it doesn't mean, okay, he single-handedly changed the world or the election. There's something about that, of mobilizing, that is antithetical to trauma, right? And again, it's like, something is happening and I am doing something about it, right? Saying something about it, having a voice, that is very important for people, and very protective for people, versus something is happening to me or around me and I can't do anything about it, right? That is in itself, in my definition, trauma in a nutshell, you know? So, yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Boshko, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great. Yeah, I've learned a lot and really appreciated your story, especially your personal story as well. That was really compelling. So yeah, thank you for doing this. And I'm glad that people like you are out there and working in conjunction with people like me, doing psychotherapy. So thanks again for being here, and please stay in touch. Speaking of which, let us know how people can learn more about you, and then a little bit about like the actual offerings you have and the ways you help.
Yes. Thank you, John, so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed our conversation so much. So my website is letshealnyc.com. You can reach me on Instagram as well, Let's Heal NYC. And my offerings are I do one-on-one Reiki sessions, one-on-one sound healing sessions, and I do also, for those of you that might be in New York, I do also group work, group sound baths regularly every month at the 14th Street Y with New York Adventures Club and different places that I regularly advertise on my Instagram.
Awesome. We'll have links to that in the description or show notes if you're listening versus watching. And yeah, thank you again for being here and for the work that you do. And yeah, let's keep in touch.
Yes, definitely. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, talk soon.
Talk soon.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Going Inside. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and share your favorite episode with a friend. You can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at John Clark Therapy, and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarktherapy.com. See you next time.